Right. So thanks for the introduction. Today I have with me Abhinav Shashank, CEO and founder of Innovaccer, one of the leading SaaS companies out of India, of course, unicorn now, and in a very promising healthcare sector, which they're trying to modernize in many ways. So let's learn from him today during this session. So Abhinav, you know that probably in the last, I would say, since pandemic, in last 18 months, Indian SaaS story has come to light. And I know that Innovaccer went through its own pivots to get to the stage where now you're seeing quite non-linear growth in your business. So and today this time's NPC session is all about world class from India. So how do you define, what does this term mean to you? Given that you have seen this journey and now you're on the path of Decacon and maybe establishing a great SaaS institution. How do you see this term?
Yeah, perfect. Firstly, Manav, thank you so much for having me here. It's an absolute pleasure to be connecting again with you and chatting with you in general, but also to be here on such a fantastic topic and discussion per se. I think world class from India has basically been such core to us per se. Like when we started off the company, this was more 2014. I think a lot of the intent for us was seeing people like Satya Nadella and people like Sundar Pichai and a lot of us basically who were sort of breaking glass ceiling and becoming CEOs of truly large multinational organizations. But we still weren't really seeing product companies kind of really come and emerge and truly be global leaders in any way or form per se. And I think that was just strange for us. We were still 23, 24 years old when we started off the company. And it was just strange for all of us coming from the top institutions of the country to basically not see an example of what's been world's number one from India. And I think that was very, very core to us, really starting up a software company. Everyone else around us was basically doing e-commerce, was doing things that were very, very central to digital transformation of India per se, but were not really global software companies per se. Freshworks was probably one of the leaders. Girish has been incredible in what he's achieved, but that was sort of between them and Zoho was the only glimmers of the companies that have basically seen global scale. So that was what we started off with. We started building out this data platform for healthcare. We first horizontally and then pivoted into creating this for healthcare, because we felt if we picked up a niche, we can be world's number one at it. That was what we were chasing. And at this point, everyone from Gartner to Class and most organizations in the world who are analyst rating agencies really put us as the number one company in that space. There is this big digital transformation of healthcare that's going to happen, and we are very, very hopeful that we are going to be the underpinning data platform for a lot of that transformation to happen over the course of next few years.
No, it's a great achievement. But what do you think changed in the last 18 to 24 months? Of course, pandemic is there, and there is 10x growth in digital transformation. But what has fundamentally changed for the Indian SaaS companies? Any thoughts on that?
I think for the first time, firstly, I think Freshworks IPO was just a milestone, right? I think it just put India sort of at the stage where you can really build from India, sell from India, and really create something that can be on NASDAQ and go as a $10 billion company and IPO. Right, I think that was a pivotal moment, for sure for India. And Girish is just insanely great at what he's kind of really achieved from that perspective. But I think there are multiple things that have changed. One, basically, I think for the first time, India has product management talent. People really understand how to build products. We built it first for the digital native consumer applications, but through that process, there is a lot of product management experience that got built across India. There is design talent availability for the first time. People really know what world class basically looks and feels like, and they're building design experiences. There has always been analytics and AI talent in India. That is basically probably like the best in the world sort of like resides in India, right? And now I think people are starting to build those things and bring those things together and really create like incredibly great products. Like you look at Postman, you look at like a lot of the companies that are breaking through like into like that $5 billion, $10 billion sort of like scale. You are seeing some of those things actually come together and create like very, very large like companies from that perspective. And I think the biggest thing that frankly changed was that global markets have now started believing that it can be done out of India. Like everyone from Scott at Tiger to SoftBank to everyone sort of like believes that software that was like innovated and invented in India can really go and become like world class and be like global scale, basically like software organizations. And you're seeing that capital sort of like flowing. So those are things that I think like have changed over the last 18, 24 months. It's never been like a better time to be a SaaS entrepreneur for sure.
I fully agree. So talent and capital, and what about the buying behavior? How does the buying behavior has changed? I know you're in enterprise sales motion. So do you see any changes in the buying behavior?
Yeah, no, I think that has changed quite a bit. Like at some point, it was when you went in our early years, when we went and sold software, people were basically like, okay, you're from India, probably like you're selling me something which is like a services piece, because we've been exceptional at it. We've seen like Infosys and TCS and Cognizant and everyone sort of like the last generation of companies that have been created from India has all been enterprise IT services per se. So the perception of India in global markets was always basically that this is going to be like a IT services organization. So for a Indian company in some way or form, like, or for an Indian entrepreneur in some way or form to go and really like sell to the enterprise a product vision was hard. It was not like the first thing that people thought about when they looked at you, and right, and I think that's evolved, like and there's been like major contributions on that front, like from like leaders like Satya and like Sundar Pichai and like all of these like leaders. But it's also been that we've seen some of those global companies. Atlassian got created from Australia, like for like it feels and that all over the world we are seeing like great companies sort of like emerge. And the notion that great software can only be created on one part of the world has sort of been shattered a little bit, right? Like global companies can come and be created out of anywhere, and India basically has the right talent pool to sort of like capitalize and build like the next generation of $100 billion companies on it for sure.
I absolutely agree. I think the biggest shift, according to me, from my experience, is the global go-to-market success now, both
Yep.
in SME and in enterprise. I think that is where India has a unique advantage. We always had, as you said, talent and capital came in, and now that added with global GTM, I think we have a great future, and I think we'll see a lot of growth in Indian SaaS. Let me shift the topic a little bit more. What is happening in the Indian market, right? We're seeing a lot of adoption in Indian market. We saw, Zoho being successful in Indian market. We are seeing even Salesforce now focus on Indian market, and many more companies seeing there. And now government has announced national health digital health mission, right? So how do you see Innovaccer playing a role in that? What is your view on the program like this?
So I think a couple of things from that. One, I think for the first time, Indian like enterprises are buying software. It's just like incredible to see. Like when we started, like it was so hard to basically go sell. Like we started off like in Delhi, right? And we our first basically like attempt was, let's whatever the data platform that we've built, let's try and basically go sell to like Indian enterprises. It was hard because there was always this build versus buy decision, and probably building was like cheaper in some way. That I'll hire like and the typical mindset like for most enterprises was that I'll hire 20 developers and they'll build anything for me, right? That mindset is also sort of like evolved quite a bit. You're seeing like large scale companies that are very tech enabled, they're buying software, and the initial 0 to 1 success for companies like that are building software can also come in India at this point. Like I have my brother who's basically like started up another cloud software company, and like his first $1 million of ARR all came from India. And it was just amazing to see, like, because for us, like when we started doing this, it was impossible. Like no one would have basically like bought like software. So that evolution in the Indian software buying cycle has definitely like sparked up. And as more and more capital basically like goes through, people will start spending more time in value added activities than basically like building software for their own. So I think India as a software consumer is going to like increase quite a bit. It's still very small in comparison to like the global markets like US and Australia and Europe in some ways, but I think like it's like expanding for sure.
Understand.
On the digital health side, just like I think on that question, I think on the digital health side, it is fundamentally brilliant what like the Indian government is doing. Like the US basically like has so much adoption of electronic health records and software in some ways. But because they went early, they did not sort of like put the right kind of standards in place. So everyone built software, but there was no information standards that were sort of like there. So everyone has a different like information standard, and it becomes very hard to interoperate healthcare information. So if you went to Dr. A and then you went to Dr. B, this information sharing is just incredibly hard per se. What India is doing right now, and what setting up standards for how healthcare information is going to get stored and how is it going to get shared fundamentally, is going to be such a brilliant move like over the next few years. And the way how UID sort of like created like this infrastructure for which digital payments sort of like got transformed over like the last 5, 7, 10 years, I think the same is going to happen like in healthcare over the next 5, 7, 10 years. Like
yeah. Absolutely. And I think also the distribution of entire Ayushman Bharat, right? So so all that will also get enabled to the same platform. So I think,
right.
yeah, in next 4, 5 years, we can see a massive change in the digital infrastructure, health infrastructure in India as well. I want to spend more time with you going to, deeper dive into global GTM. But before we go there, there always been, we have a massive IT services industry, $150 billion. NASSCOM, of course, has a pioneer in bringing services to the world. So how do you see the role of services company in the entire SaaS ecosystem? I know Innovaccer has a partnership with HCL, and a pretty deep one. So what are your learnings? What is your advice to the people who are listening to this conversation?
Yeah, I think when you're building up like a SaaS company in general, I think the initial go-to-market has always got to be done by the entrepreneurial team and like the founding team and like the sales team, right? So most of your channel generally like is the like direct sales channel per se, right? It evolves very quickly. And if you are really wanting to basically hit scale at some point, like the deep-rooted partnerships with these hyper-scaling basically system integration companies is just like an incredibly important thing. And we've basically like enjoyed that quite a bit, like with various basically like system, like at the HCL partnership you talked about. And it's been great. Like they're obviously helping us implement much faster. We can implement at 20 places basically at one point of time, rather than like building all of that capacity like in-house, etc. There is very deep-rooted collaboration on that front, and also on go-to-market fronts, like use cases that we haven't built on top of our platform. They are now building like new use cases and really helping us sort of like chart like new territories in that way as well. So I think the advantage of these things from a scale perspective, especially like I think like we are now starting to hit like that $100 million ARR mark in some way, like and now at this stage, the next level of growth is going to be very dependent on the partnerships that we sort of like create, and partnerships with like SI vendors and like large IT services companies is going to be like one of the most critical ones in that way.
I understand. And that's an interesting angle. So how does the global go-to-market has worked with HCL for you? Has been very successful for you? Any learnings for the upcoming SaaS entrepreneurs there?
I think it's like if you go to these they are very, very large companies, right? Like so if you go to them at very early stages, you are not like relevant for them, right? So like trying to basically like initially depend on like these organizations for like scale is just not like a very, very good idea. Like they are large organizations, they have a lot of people. You can be like going and meeting a ton of people and really not getting like any value. Once you've established some level of scale, like there is product market fit, you have hit like initial scale, these relationships then become very, very meaningful, right? Like, so I think we tried this, like, frankly, for us, like when we were starting up and back in India, there was not too much of a playbook, right? Like we were learning, falling, all of that, like one step at a time. Especially like enterprise SaaS, there is nothing that you can basically like look at and say that this is like the playbook that you can sort of like go deploy. So I think like a lot of it was learning process, but now I think it's starting to like help quite a bit. Like we are like pitching to tens of customers together. We are doing a global demand generation activities together. We are going and pitching digital transformation activities, deals that could basically be double-digit million ARR sort of like deals in some way. So a lot of that is starting to happen for us now, and you cannot basically do those deals like alone. You will always need like someone like HCL and Infosys from that perspective to really come and do the change management and implementation and a lot of those things around your platform in general.
No, it's great to hear that. That's really a symbiotic relationship. We have a massive service industry, and we have entrepreneurs who are building great SaaS products. So I think it's really, really heartening to hear that. So now coming to one of the most talked of often talked subject, the global go-to-market, right? So
Yeah.
I know it is a very difficult bridge to cross. Still, when we're looking at SaaS Movie, we did that report with McKinsey along with NASSCOM, and we found that Indian companies are still under-investing in global go-to-market. So walk us through some of your learnings in building the entire global go-to-market at Innovaccer. What are the learnings? What are the things that you will avoid if you were doing something new again? It'll be good for SaaS entrepreneurs to both listen to those learnings and understand.
Yeah, I think so. When we started, right, like and that's true for most entrepreneurs that are starting up in India, right? You're spending in rupees in most cases, right? Like, and suddenly when you basically like hit global markets, like when you want to hire a top-notch salesperson or a sales team, it starts to look very, very expensive, right? And in most cases, what we've kind of really seen is that people get scared, and we got scared, right? Like that, okay, like dude, like what happens if this does not work out? Right? And that we're spending all of these millions of dollars suddenly that we were not spending, and what happens if it doesn't sort of like work out per se. Most global software companies, especially the enterprise ones, spend an insane amount of capital on go-to-market. Their cost of customer acquisitions for $1 of ARR that they are adding, they're generally spending $1 of cost of like customer acquisition in some way, and they're okay with it, right? Like I think that level of aggression and like investment in go-to-market is just something that we don't basically like do like in Indian software, right? And I think that is a fundamental paradigm shift. Like if you look at people like starting from Salesforce to Oracle, the amount of effort that they would basically put in whether that's sales teams, whether that's demand generation, whether that's global marketing, etc. It's just like through the roof from that perspective. And unless basically like we get comfortable with that risk as basically like Indian entrepreneurs in some way or form, that is basically the cost to sort of like pay for global growth, it's hard. And we learned it. We basically like went through a few cycles of like investing, panic, learning, this is how the world functions and all of those things. I think it's just how it is. So don't basically like worry about it. And even for investors, right? Like I think it's important for investors to sort of like push their, like especially software entrepreneurs, on investing incredibly aggressively like on go to market.
And what are the learnings? What are the, for example, now capital is not a problem, as you said, right? We have a lot of money flowing into the SaaS ecosystem after Zoho's and Freshworks success and success of Innovaccer and so on and so forth. So what are the top 3 steps you would take once you have, let's say, raised your Series A or Series B to really create a world-class revenue engine or go-to-market?
Yeah, I think like one of the things that you should like absolutely like think about if you're like a early stage entrepreneur is figure out where your customer is, right? And just basically make sure that you're like spending as much time with them as possible. Like don't sort of like not be at the customer location. We shifted, like we started in 2014, but we shifted to the US, like between like me and Sandeep, like we shifted to the US like in 2017, right? So 3 years we were basically operating out of this like India US sort of like corridor, and we made that switch like third or fourth year into like our general operations. If I was doing it again, I would just do that day one, right? Like spend as much time as possible like with your customers, and then build teams basically locally in markets. Don't basically like feel like that, okay, like because I spent a lot of time with the team like that I have currently, that they'll basically be able to solve it. Build local teams. Sales organizations really need to be like local. They need to understand how the world works in that area and all of those type of things, and hiring subject matter experts and people like who understand those markets is just going to be like incredibly critical.
Got it. Understand. I think, and of course, all these learnings are going to help entrepreneurs, build the businesses in a very different way than the last decade, I would say. I think so. So massive opportunity. I think before we really close the session, I would also, like to spend a little bit time with you on how the personal journey has been, shifting from India to the US. And congratulations, you got blessed with a baby girl, in the last few days. So what kind of changes personally you have to go through to, to pivot the company to where it is today?
I think it was hard, Manav, right? Like you know this better than basically like most people, right? That shifting from basically like one country to the other, like you are really figuring out like what are cultural differences, what are things, like forget about like selling software into that place. When I landed in San Francisco, I was calling San Jose San Jose, right? Like, so it was just like so much. The western part of like America is different than what the East Coast behaves as, what the South behaves as, and really understanding a lot of like the cultural nuances of what makes America America, right? It was just very, very hard. The first couple of years for us, more than basically understanding the American healthcare system, for us, it was just like really ingraining what America was all about, right? And that's why I was saying that like spend that time early enough in your process, right? Because like you will need to get context, and we did that, and like it's been feels like I think like home. For sure, like we just basically, I think like we had our baby girl. It was just like amazing. The American healthcare ecosystem. We basically like worked with like I think like doctors and all of these. It's just awesome, right? But it takes time for you to basically like settle in and really then sort of like find your groove and then start running. You will not be able to run like day one, and just understanding that is going to be the process and not get like very okay, what is the magnitude of change is going to be massive, and being comfortable with that change is going to be very, very helpful.
Yeah, I guess I think on a closing note, change is the only constant in entrepreneur's life. And
Yep.
I guess, we speak very less about our personal journeys, which also goes through massive change from, because when you are starting in your early 20s or late 30s, your family is also going through, you're getting married,
Yeah.
you're having babies, then you're getting into 40s and your parents are getting old. So I think entrepreneur's journey is always hard, but I think it's always to also look at the personal side. Thank you very much, Abhinav, to be on the conversation today and share your learnings. And all the SaaS entrepreneurs, India SaaS story is great. I think it's just starting now. So go and build as many companies as you can. There's all the support that is possible there. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks, Manav, for having me here.
Thanks.